Hello, everybody. Welcome to Relax with Animal Facts. I am Steph Wolf, and I am here to learn some facts with you about our furry, scaly, or slimy friends, all while relaxing and sometimes just going a little bit off topic. And I've said this many a time, but for any of you new listeners out there, we're getting new listeners every single day, and welcome everybody. I love to go off topic sometimes. Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it going off topic. It's on topic in a way, but it's usually relating to humans or relating to other animals or whatnot, because that sense of comparison is a really good way to learn, in my opinion. Anyways, so welcome back, everybody, or welcome anybody here that's new. So this is a podcast where I go on the internet, find some facts about a certain animal that I would like to learn about. And in the case today, which I'm very excited, is the alpaca. So this is another lovable kind of animal. But I go online, I find facts. I don't know much about these animals, and I come here and we learn together. We go on this little journey together. And whether you're learning and listening in the middle of the day, it could be late at night, you're maybe trying to wind down or even fall asleep, you can find a nice couch, find a nice chair somewhere and just listen. And you can be attentive, you can space in and out. That is entirely up to you, and every form of listening is completely encouraged. So I'm just going to talk about really quickly some of the stuff we have going on with the podcast. We have an Instagram and a Twitter, both new. They are RWAF podcast. So if you want to support the show, you can always follow the show on Spotify. You can follow me on those social media sites, and we can kind of start to communicate as to what you guys would like to hear next. You could always and even get a shout out on the show if I decide to go with an animal that you would like to hear about. So as always, before we get into the show, I'm going to talk about the sources, where I got my sources from. So I got them from videopenpets.com, mnn.com, and livescience.com. It's the first time I'm using the first two. Video Pen Pets is like Video Pen Pets, except instead of a V, it's a W, and then mnn.com. I haven't heard of either of these before, but I've used Live Science or Live Science a multitude of times on the show. So let's get into it. So alpacas, first off, if you haven't seen alpacas before or heard about them, people usually kind of group them with llamas. They are fairly different, but it's a good idea. It's a good sort of a starting line for what alpacas look like, is to imagine a llama. But they're part of the Camelidae family, and that includes llamas, guanacos, and vicuñas from South America, and Bactrian and dromedary camels from Asia and Africa. So there's a lot of really cool animals in this family. So there are no wild alpacas because they are pretty much just domesticated versions of vicuñas, which are those South American ruminants rather, that lived high in the Andes Mountains. So vicuñas were we just mentioned them, that they were in the Camelidae family, along with the llamas and the guanacos. So alpacas are entirely domesticated at this point. They became domesticated around 6,000 years ago by people in the Andes Mountains. So because alpacas are native to the Andes, they're used to elevations that are huge elevations. We're talking minimum 15,000 feet, closer to 16,000 feet. So very, very high up. But these guys are adaptable. They're amazing. They've been transported all over the world. It doesn't really matter to them. They're happy anywhere. It's always a good lesson there. But I'm sure that their system is built in terms of lung capacity and their blood is definitely used to, I would imagine, being more efficient, because as you know, you may not know, this may be the first time you're hearing this, but in elevated areas, there's less oxygen. And that is why human beings who train for certain things, they like to use what are deemed as altitude masks, which are a little bit controversial. And, I'm not going to put in an opinion about it, but it's been said that it doesn't truly mimic elevation, because elevation isn't just limiting oxygen, which these elevation masks do. And the reason that they use these masks is to kind of increase the carrying capacity that your red blood cells have for oxygen. So being able to really produce more red blood cells to be able to carry more oxygen. So it's just, it's a really interesting theory of that, how that works, but it hasn't really been shown to increase performance in many ways. There have been individuals that have done blood transfusions to try to increase their red blood cell count, and in turn have more power when they compete. It's illegal, to what I understand, but or not illegal, but it's against the rules of many associations to do that. But now we're truly off topic. But what I'm trying to say is that alpacas have they most likely have a system that is used to higher elevations. So I imagine that their blood cell count is higher. That's what I would imagine, but I'm not exactly sure. That's just me spitballing here. 99% of the world population of alpacas is found in South America. So we got that 1% in North America, but that doesn't mean you can't see one. Have I seen an alpaca before? I don't know if I've seen an alpaca, but I think I'm almost 100% I've seen a llama before. But alpacas have some of the silkiest and most versatile fiber that is found in nature, which they are shorn. Shorn is the word for removing their fur annually. So just like sheep in this case. But we're going to go over a bunch of really interesting characteristics about their fur that makes it such a superlative. That's a fancy word for just meaning super high grade fur that is really special. So their fur is a specialty fiber that has been described as stronger than mohair, which I had to research. Mohair is a fabric or a yarn that is made from the hair of the Angora goat. So that's also a specialty sort of fiber, but its main credit is that it's super strong. But the alpaca fur is actually, or they don't refer to it as alpaca fur, they refer to it as alpaca fiber all throughout the article. So why don't I say that? We'll say alpaca fiber is stronger than mohair, which is the super strong fiber from the Angora goat. It's finer than cashmere. It's smoother than silk, if you can believe that. Softer than cotton, and warmer than goose down. And goose down is just a term that is used for the kind of the feathers that are on the underbelly of geese, not gooses. I was about to say gooses, of geese. And it's better breathing than the thermal knits that you sometimes see. So that is a pretty heavy resume there for alpaca fiber. Now, I don't know if maybe I should have looked into this website and seen if they're actually also selling alpaca fur. To my knowledge, they were not, but they seem to talk very, very highly of this fiber. And it also comes in 22 different colors and hundreds of shades. I very much wasn't familiar with the alpaca fiber market. Now I am, I guess. But also it's hypoallergenic. And it's not just hypoallergenic, it's also flame resistant and water resistant like wool. This is starting to sound like a little bit of an infomercial at this point. It also has a unique ability to mimic cotton in moisture regain. So it's water resistant like wool, but mimics cotton in the way of moisture regain. And this allows them to feel lighter than wool, but also at the same time warmer than cotton in especially cool and damp climates. So we have an extensive resume for these guys' fur or their fiber or whatever you'd like to call it. that is extremely prized, and I'm sure domestication was I think the biggest contributor of the reason of domestication was their fiber, because having such a versatile product, especially in the Andes, right, is amazing. I don't know how, because with domestication comes, of course, food. And I don't know if people eat alpacas. I hope not, but I'm sure in certain parts of the world. I think I read that they do in certain parts of Peru. But their main kind of domestication reason, I believe, is their fiber. From what I was reading, that's my assumption. So alpacas are ancient animals, and they were domesticated by the Incas. And the Incas are they were originally a small tribe that were in Peru in the southern highlands, and in about less than a century, during the 1400s, so the 15th century, they built one of the single most largest and most tightly controlled empires the world has ever known. And these guys knew exactly what they were doing, because they domesticated these amazing animals due to the quality of their fur. And they were raised for their fleece, and due to this quality that we've talked so highly about, the alpaca fiber was reserved almost exclusively, or entirely exclusively, for the elite and for the noble. So I'm not sure how long it takes for their fur to grow back. I imagine that it would be a decent amount of time, and of course, depending on how many alpacas they had domesticated at that time, I can understand how it would be exclusively for the elite and noble. I am now wondering if there are maybe alpaca coats or something like that for sale online. I'm sure that they are. I'm sure there are, and I'm sure that they are extremely expensive. Generally, I don't really know how much these things go for. If people go straight to the source, I have absolutely no idea. But this fleece must be something. It must be on the next level of comfortable. They are therapeutic animals as well. So just like you have therapy dogs, you have I think there's also even therapy baby pigs. I could be wrong. I hope I'm not wrong. But anyways, so they are therapeutic animals and have been used at healthcare facilities and retirement homes all around the world. And one couple in Australia specifically have been providing people with therapy alpacas for close to 15 years. So these guys are sensitive and really intuitive animals. And if you've seen what they look like, I can get that sort of impression. I think some people associate alpacas and llamas as sort of jerks, because maybe they've only seen videos of them spitting or something like that. We'll talk about why they do that a little bit later. But these guys are actually incredibly curious and genuine. They're amazing. And there's two kinds of alpacas specifically. There are the Surrey and the Huacaya. I hope I'm saying that right. The Surrey has a fiber that forms silky dreadlocks. So this one is more rare. It's about 10% of the alpaca population that has these silky dreadlocks, while the Huacaya, which is the most, when you think of an alpaca, this is probably the one you were thinking of. It has a woolly and dense fleece that is kind of like a teddy bear. So, I apologize. Let me make a distinction really quickly. When I say 10% of alpacas, I'm saying 10% of alpacas in North America specifically. I don't know how what those percentages are in South America. So 90% of alpacas are in North America are Huacaya. Okay, so I just wanted to make that distinction. So alpacas and llamas can successfully crossbreed, and crossbreeding is an interesting thing that happens among many species. And the offspring that they make is known as a huarizo. I didn't research too much into the huarizos, but when you see that these two different species are able to crossbreed, that means that they are somewhat close in terms of evolutionary lineage. Because if they're too far apart, there are no viable offspring that will be able to come of that, as we know. Just like with horses and donkeys, I believe you make mules. It's that same sort of deal. But let's make some distinctions between alpacas and llamas, because to me they were almost interchangeable before this episode. So let's learn a few things about how you can differentiate them. Llamas have long banana-shaped ears, while alpacas have straight ears, and they are a little bit smaller in comparison. In general, llamas seem to be a lot bigger. So their faces are also a little bit different. The llama having a longer face rather, while alpaca's faces look a little bit smushed. So that word was used in the website. I don't know if I would describe it as smushed. When I think about smushed in animals, the first animal that comes to mind is certain breeds of dogs, specifically pugs. I absolutely love pugs, but those poor guys have a really smushed face due to extensive breeding in the past. They're still cute, but there's some kind of guilt from seeing like how human beings have bred dogs to be that way. But in the case of alpacas, they have faces that look a little bit smushed. Llamas are also larger than alpacas. They weigh up to 400 pounds. So these guys are very large, while average alpacas are only about 175 pounds. So that's very close to my weight. So these guys are very different, and I think that you can definitely tell the difference by simply looking. If you're looking at two adult males, maybe it'll be fairly obvious, I imagine, because they're over twice the weight, llamas, in comparison to alpacas. Let's move on here. So during breeding, the male alpaca emits a unique throaty vocalization that they refer to as orgling. That's my word of the week. Similar to a hum. So humming is something that's not exclusive to alpacas. We talked about humming, I think, in orangutans, or was it gorillas? I think it was gorillas. Humming and vocalizations are incredibly important in many species in terms of communication, or just that just happens to be different kinds of social behaviors. And what I find personally really interesting are the differences between them, because vocalization depends on many things. It depends on the anatomical structure of the animal almost entirely. It depends on a lot of things. So you'll hear different sounds from different creatures. If you compare vocalizations from a dolphin to vocalizations from orangutans, or vocalizations from, in this case, alpacas, those differences are there's almost no similarity between the two, other than the fact that they are both sounds being emitted by the animal. And of course, then we have humans being the incredible vocal creatures that we are, having a vocal range that has more capacity than any other species on the entire planet, that has allowed everybody to do the things that they do. And in this case, for me, it's making this podcast and you being able to listen and understand. Maybe this podcast, I'm not going to say this podcast would be worse if there was an alpaca just emitting a unique throaty vocalization for 30 minutes, but it's an incredible gift that we have to be able to vocalize the way that we do, and I don't for 1 second take it for granted. Although orgling sounds good too. During National Alpaca Farm Days, I've never heard of this before, apparently anyone can meet an alpaca at a local farm. I don't think this is universal. I don't know if this is specifically to United States or to somewhere else, but I am going to research when National Alpaca Farm Days are and maybe post it on my Twitter. So you can follow the Twitter if you'd like to hear about National Alpaca Farm Days. And according to the Alpaca Owners Association, they do not actually eat very much. So that is a good change from what we are used to. We are now used to, we've done 15 episodes or something like that, where animals are eating so much of their percentage in body weight, like 30 pounds, 40 pounds of food a day. And in the case of these 125 pound on average animals, or 125 to 175 pounds, they eat only about 2 to 3 pounds per day. So that is definitely not the same or not very close to the 20% to 30% or even sometimes to 50% of their body weight in food, which is what we're used to on this podcast. And one thing that I found really, really cool, but also kind of sad at the same time, is that alpacas must be raised in pairs because they can die from loneliness. They are not the only animal that can die from loneliness. I mean, human beings, there's not really too many cases of that happening, at least it being exclusively due to loneliness, but humans are very, very social creatures. We absolutely rely on each other and being able to be in touch with people. It's super, healthy to be around people and be able to socialize. And the same goes for alpacas. In their case, it's mostly life and death, right? So the association really pushes that if you want to raise alpacas domestically or whatever, it could be just if you want to raise for fur or whatever it be, that you raise them in pairs because they rely on the social interaction between each other, so interpersonally, not just with humans. And as we said before, these aren't the only animals that are this way. That if you're interested in raising them, you should definitely look into having two, right? Brother and sister, or just two separate. It doesn't really matter. So let's talk about spitting for a second. If you have ever seen or been spit on by an alpaca, in my case, I have only ever seen people being spit on by llamas and alpacas on the internet, on YouTube. That's kind of my resource for that. They do that when they feel threatened, guys. So they're not doing it because they are monsters or because they're mean to you. They spit when they feel threatened or they've been abused in some way, generally. Maybe by the person that they're spitting on or maybe not. This is a sort of evolutionary thing. They're not doing it just to spite you. These guys are very lovable, but they will spit if they feel threatened. So generally, don't try to, push these guys around at the zoo or the farm or wherever you see them. One cool thing is that they share a bathroom. So they use a communal dung pile. And while this does sound gross and fantastic at the same time, because they do this, they can be successfully house trained. Just like how cats have litter boxes. In the case of alpacas, they have communal dung piles or just one dung pile. So that's really cool. They breed once a year. The female alpaca has a gestation period of about 242 to 345 days, so just under a year there. So I didn't do the math for that, but we can do it. You can do that in your head, or I can try here. Okay, so we're talking maybe 11 and a half months. We'll say like 7.5 to 11.5 months. That's what I'll say. That's my guess, or 8.5. And the birthing process can take up to 7 hours. So, long birthing process. There's animals that give birth for much shorter time or much longer time. It's all between species. I don't have a big relative point for that because I don't really talk about the birthing process too much on the show. And baby alpacas, I always love this part, but they're called crias. Cria, so that's spelled C-R-I-A. As to why they're called crias, I don't exactly know, but we'll talk about where their name came from at the end of the show. Not crias, but alpaca. And they can live up to 20 years. So 20 years is a decently long time, not as long as we're used to for the majority of the animals that we've covered, but 20 years is how long that they live. And their signature underbite that you see, they don't have teeth in the top front of their mouths, so that's what gives them this appearance of having this charming little underbite that they're always rocking. I personally love it. I think it makes them very cute. But that is why they don't have teeth in the top front of their mouths. As to why, I don't exactly know. That is an interesting fact. But actually, now that we're at the end of the show, I always end it with a fact about where the name came from. Maybe there's a cool fact. This is the first episode that I could not find anything. Zilch. I could not find anything. which is really disappointing. I built it up earlier, but I couldn't find anything to do with why alpacas are named alpacas. I guess one, when they were domesticated 6,000 years ago, someone just started calling them an alpaca, and that's what happened. That's what I'm going to say, because there's nothing else that says anything. Anytime that I was trying to find origins about the name, I just found origins like we talked about previously of when they were domesticated and things like that. So unfortunately, there's no origin story for this one. So sorry to leave you guys with a cliffhanger, but you're gonna have to wait for a name story on the next episode of the show. So thank you all so very much for tuning in today, or whenever you're listening. This is episode, I believe, 15, and we are on a roll. There's so many new listeners every day, and I absolutely love you guys, and thank you so much for tuning in and supporting the show. Make sure to follow the show on Spotify or whatever you do on iTunes or Stitcher. I'm not entirely sure. I only use Spotify. But all you guys listening out there, thank you so much. The best way for you that you can support the show is to share it with a friend. Maybe just one friend that would like to relax with some animal facts and kind of get all warmed up from listening to these guys' alpaca fibers. So anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I will see you on the next episode with the next animal. Take care.